I'm thinking about all my med school buddies. And one of the things, as we're all in sort of this phase, is there's a heaviness around them. There's a lot of darkness. They feel trapped, they feel stuck. And, I think men aren't really great about talking about this, just as like women have a lot of shame around, menopause and being considered menopausal and all these different stereotypes that we have. How do you think we got here where we are so misunderstood or so sort of there's so much of a negative bias or negative sort of connotation around this phase of life? Is there a backstory to that? Is there a cultural reason that we've landed here? Because again, a lot of my background is studying Eastern systems of medicine and, holism and things like that. And they actually put their elders up on a pedestal, right? They were the center of a family. They were the center of a community. You would go to them. They would have family meetings, village meetings, tribal meetings. But I feel like in our modern world, you kind of have to hide a little bit, if you are going to admit that you're 40, 50, 60, and I'm so curious why you think we even got to this point to begin with.
When you fear death, being midway through your life is scary. When aging is perceived as a negative, then getting older, and in midlife, just as you get comfortable in your own skin, it starts to sag. Um, so the reality is that the
So
physical
true.
body is more evidently aging. Um, I think that, and if we think of society as like, oh, I'm going to be living age apartheid in my 70s and 80s in some nursing home or retirement community or wherever, you can see why people would look at midlife and say, man, if I can survive my midlife crisis, all I have to look forward to is disease, decrepitude, and death. But that premise is so off on so many levels. But it is the premise that speaks to the idea that, as we get older, our options in life decline, our happiness declines, etc. But there's a huge gap between that sort of societal message about aging and the personal one. The U curve of happiness research, for those who don't know it, shows that basically, yes, we do have a long, slow decline in happiness, starting in our 20s, although today people in their early 20s are not very happy either. So, but historically, it's been a long, slow decline from early 20s and bottoming out around 45 to 50. And then with each decade after age 50, you get happier and happier. So that's not well known. And there's a lot of reasons why this is one of the core pieces of curriculum we do at MEA, at the Modern Elder Academy, with people, is to help them understand what gets better with age. And that's a big piece of my book, Learning to Love Midlife. The subtitle of the book is 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. So I think a lot of it is the dominance of a culture that has been very focused on beauty and brawn and the body. So the 3 Bs: beauty, brawn, body. And in a culture, and partly because of movies, partly because of Madison Avenue and products. Products are often oriented toward younger people, and the products that are oriented toward older people are often anti-aging products, which are usually anti-women products. They're dedicated to helping mostly women feel badly about their natural process of aging. And so that's the landscape we live in. And there's one last piece, around it, which is economic. And that is that 125, 150 years ago, we were an agricultural economy. And if you were an older person on a farm, male or female, you understood the weather. The Farmer's Almanac was really land wisdom and weather wisdom. And so the longer you were on the planet, the more you knew that. And so an older person, an older farmer was really valued. And then you go into the industrial era and people are on assembly lines, and like the older worker might not be as valued because it's physical labor often. And then you go to the technology era and like, oh my God, the older workers like thought to be, a Luddite and a digital immigrant as opposed to a digital native. And so if you see the economy's evolution, you can see that we have moved away from, what might have valued an older person, on a farm versus, I worked at Airbnb, and a tech company and I was so out of it in terms of culturally by being a boomer. On the other hand, they loved me. And they loved me because as a company, Airbnb started to realize, wow, if we can combine older brains that tend to have crystallized intelligence and think systemically with younger brains that tend to be fast and focused, and it's what's called fluid intelligence, then we have the best of both worlds. But we have a long way to go to have the business world see that older brains should be side by side with younger brains.
And I wonder if you could share with us, your 2 things. Like, one is what you took from that experience at Airbnb and becoming and how you leaned into being that mentor, because I think that's a big theme as we kind of transition into midlife, is how you grow into that role.
Yeah, I mean, there's Richard Rohr is one of our faculty members at MEA, and he's a famous Christian mystic. He's written 50 books, and he says that the natural process for us as humans is that we have an operating system of how we see the world that is really the operating system of our ego up until around midlife, and it can be healthy. I mean, an ego can be very positive in your life. It can actually help to individuate you, propel you forward, have clarity about what's important and meaningful to you, and what's best for you. The problem is often our ego gets the best of us and takes over our lives. And then in midlife, something starts to shift and we move from the ego to the soul, and the new operating system is the soul. But nobody told us that there's an operating system change, and there's no operating instructions for this soul. So and often what it is sometimes it's the screwy circumstances in midlife that, the divorce that you weren't expecting, getting laid off, having your parents pass away, being in sandwich generation, menopause, a bunch of things that get a person to a place of like, wow, I'm on my knees. I have just had some circumstances that have led to not the dark night of the soul, but the dark night of the ego. And I'm ready to actually press the reset button. And so the beauty of that is that it allows you to potentially take off all of these uniforms and this wardrobe of identities and roles you've had. Connie Zweig's book, I think it's called The Inner Book of Aging or something like that, Inner Work of Aging, talks about moving from role to soul as we midlife. And this is particularly true for women. Women wear more hats and are often.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh,
Can we just
why?
have a moment?
Our
Yeah,
favorite guy ever.
let's be clear. Women have more roles, juggle more things, are better multitaskers than men. And whereas men have sort of like, okay, again, I'm talking very traditionally here. Men have this role of being, the maybe the provider in the family, if it's very traditional. And then so they sort of like the father in the family, and then they go to work. And maybe they do a couple other things. Maybe they're a baseball coach or something like that for their kid, but there's not many more roles. Whereas women have, the provider for the parents on both sides, including on his side. Again, I'm talking very traditionally here. Plus, they actually have a job. Plus, they actually take care of the family, and they're the homemaker while they have a job. And yes, they are a PTA president, and they're a political activist. And I mean, there's a lot, and women are able to inhabit those roles. But there's a point in midlife where you have to start looking at all these roles, and some of them the roles are archetypical roles or archetypical roles, like the caregiver, or the hero or heroine or whatever. And you really need to look in midlife around like, is it time to dose down that role or to let go of that role? And so this is what happened. So for me for my personal story at Airbnb, I had been the CEO of my own company with 3,500 employees. I was the founder of that company. And for 24 years, I did that. When I joined Airbnb after 2 years of sort of a break, that midlife atrium, all of a sudden I'm by far the oldest person in the company. I have the most experience, and I am mentoring the 3 founders, but I'm also reporting to Brian Chesky, who I'm mentoring as the CEO, and he's 21 years younger than me. So I'm reporting to someone 21 years younger than me who doesn't have the life experience I have or running businesses that I have. But I had a lot of respect for him. I really liked how his mind worked, and he was very talented. So I had to get to a place where I realized my job here is no longer to be the CEO of the company or have my, be on stage and have my, face on the cover of a magazine. My job is to be the CEO whisperer. I'm no longer the sage on the stage. I'm the guide on the side. And in so doing, I started to realize that my definition of success was helping Brian to be the best leader he could be. And to take a guy who, started the business when he was 26 and had never run a business before and had gone to Rhode Island School of Design. He was a designer, no business background at all. To take that guy and both learn from him as well. He taught me a lot, but also to help teach him such that today he is the CEO of a public company that's a Fortune 500 company that, for a while there was the most valuable hospitality company in the world. That's a lot. That was my new thing. So it's sort of like being a father. It's sort of like being, Erik Erikson, the famous developmental psychologist in the 20th century, said that as we get older, it's no longer about I am, my business card, or I am what I control, or I am what people say about me, or I am my stuff, or I am my body. It's I am what survives me. And that's the idea of like, I am here to be generative, to help generate things for future generations in a very altruistic mode. And that had to become my new perspective at Airbnb. And it was a beautiful shift because I really did feel a shift from ego to soul in that.